So far, we've learned the three exponent rules that will help us with multiplying polynomials. So we had the product rule, the power rule, and the products to a power rule. Make sure you know how to use those. Make sure you have practiced those because those are going to be a key component to the rest of our examples with multiplying polynomials. So for topic 4, we're going to multiply very specifically monomials. And remember, monomials are polynomials with exactly one term. So we're going to be multiplying two or more expressions that are just one term each, okay? So when this happens, if you have a products to power rule, do that first. So if you have an exponent outside parentheses, take care of that first. Once you do that, you then have potentially power rule that you have to use. So you take care of that. And then finally, you want to multiply coefficients. And last, you're going to apply the product rule. So that's where you multiply two things that have the same base. So right here in this example, you could potentially use all three of those rules for exponents that we've already learned. So it's really important that if you're not familiar with those and you're not comfortable with those, go back and practice those first. Okay. So for example 4, it just says find each product. So looking at part A, I want to first look to see if I have any exponents outside parentheses. I don't, okay, which is fine, okay? If we did have exponents outside the parentheses, we would want to take care of those first, okay, but we don't. So now we're to this step right here, which just says go ahead and multiply your coefficients. So looking at these two expressions that are being multiplied, I do have coefficients of 4 and 3, so I can go ahead and multiply 4 and 3. That just gives me 12. And now I have 12 times x squared. Well, here I'm multiplying two expressions that have the same base. That tells me to apply the product rule. So I'm going to keep my 12. I'm also going to keep my base of x, and then I'm going to add my exponents. So x times x squared just becomes x to the 1 plus 2, or x to the third power. So my coefficient was 12, and my variable term became x to the third. So multiplying monomials really not that difficult. You just have to know those rules for exponents first. All right, for part B, again, look to see if we have exponents on the outside. I've not done that in this example at all, so you don't have to worry about that one. So we do want to multiply our exponents, or not multiply our exponents, God, multiply our coefficients, okay? So we want to take -7 times 5, which is -35. And then we need to take those variable factors and multiply those. So we have x to the third times x to the fourth. Well, this again is a product rule. I'm multiplying two things that have the same base. Okay, so I want to keep my -35 coefficient. I want to keep my base of x for this variable factor, and then I want to add my exponents. Well, 3 plus 4 is 7, so my final answer here is -35 x to the 7th power. So again, look to see if you have exponents on the outside. If so, multiply or apply each factor inside parentheses with that power. Potentially use the power rule to simplify. You then want to multiply your coefficients, and then finally use the product rule to simplify your variable piece. All right, last up, we have -1/3 x to the fourth times -1/2 x to the fifth. Anytime students see fractions, they get all bent out of shape. Look, at this point in your math career, you should be fairly good with fractions. You also have a calculator that you can use to potentially assist yourself, so don't freak out when you see the fractions. Know first that I have no outside exponents, so I don't have to worry about the products to a power rule or the power rule. I just need to multiply my coefficients and then apply the product rule here. So looking at my coefficients, I have -1/3 times -1/2. When I multiply two negatives, I get a positive. So I really just have 1/3 times 1/2. I then have x to the fourth times x to the fifth. Well, 1/3 times 1/2, I can just multiply straight across. 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 2 is 6. So I know I'm going to get 1/6 times something. Well, here I have a product rule that needs to be applied. I have x to the fourth times x to the fifth. So I'm multiplying two things that have the same base. I'm going to keep the base. I'm going to add my exponents. So this becomes 1/6 x to the ninth. You could also potentially see this written out as x to the ninth over 6. I'm okay if you leave the coefficient completely separate from the variable factor, but just know that these two things are exactly the same. Okay, so there you have it. That's multiplying monomials. There's really not that much to it. Just know that the first thing you want to do is the products to a power rule. So if there's exponents outside, take care of those first. Then you may potentially have to apply the power rule. If you do have the products to a power, a lot of times the power rule kind of comes embedded in there. If you don't have those two happening, multiply your coefficients, multiply your variables, and when you multiply those variables, that's where you're going to apply your product rule.